Is SMMA dead?
It's a good question. I think it depends how you define it. I wouldn't say anything's ever dead, right? Because what does dead mean? It really just means, is it oversaturated? If you're smart and innovative and if you could do something a little bit different, you can always make an impact.
What were some of the first steps you took into building your first SMMA?
My strategy was sales is service. Suddenly it completely flips the frame in your head of how can I get something to how can I help this person.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced?
Most of the challenges were around limiting beliefs. I had massive imposter syndrome. You know, if I'm 18, why would this business work with me? That's what you got to do to be successful. You got to be a lone wolf. The reality is in business, it's the complete opposite. How do you overcome that? Well, you just got to be in the dirt. Most people don't have a lack of information. They actually have too much information.
Something a lot of people struggle with is the fact of being vulnerable.
The more authentic you can be, the better. You cannot be too authentic. Everyone is craving that authenticity, where so much of what's shown online is just fake.
Yeah, you're comparing their highs with your lows.
Now, the question is, how do you then be authentic? Stop thinking about yourself. It's not about you, it's about who you're helping.
What do you wish you knew about SMMA before you started? Ebrahim Turner, welcome to the show. Can you tell us what SMMA is, and can you take us back to that pivotal moment when you realized your SMMA could change your life?
Yeah, it stands for Social Media Marketing Agency. It's quite a generalized term now. Basically just means running an agency or doing some kind of service business, which is essentially you do a service in exchange for money. So whether it's a middleman or someone's paying you to run some ads or write some emails for them or build a website, right? It can really be anything that you'd want to do typically online for another business. For me, I kind of realized while I was doing my degree, the jobs that I wanted to do, which were mainly going to work in an investment bank, were pretty much the pinnacle, right? So I did economics, so not that far off what you do with business management, maybe a bit more mathsy, which I didn't realize at the time. I wish someone told me how much friggin' maths there was, because I hate maths, dude. Um, but yeah, essentially, man, when I was at university, I realized about halfway through that everyone was aiming at this same goal of getting a job in an investment bank, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. And that was essentially what success meant, right? And then I haven't told this story too much. One day, an ex-student came in, and this was actually someone who'd worked at Goldman Sachs. And I never forget, he was making £256,000 per year. And that was the most money I'd ever heard someone make in person up in that point. So I was listening to every word this guy said, right? This guy was probably about 50, a VP at Goldman Sachs, really nice suit, nice watch. So I'm like, okay, all ears. But what he actually shared with me was completely the opposite to what I expected him to say. What he actually said is working at these banks is kind of like if you imagine a big grandfather clock, right? You know, there's very grandiose wooden clocks that are very intricate with all these
With the pendulum.
The pendulum, yeah, and they look incredible and very prestigious from the outside. But he said it's working at, one of these banks is like a grandfather clock from the outside, but when you go and peer around the back, there's no batteries in it. There's not much actually going on. And he went on to say how even though he was a VP, something like 4% of the whole company were VPs. So it didn't really mean much. And that money he was making, he had to work 60 to 80 hours a week for, barely got to see his family, barely got to see his kids grow up. And he was honest. And that was the moment when I realized that if I go down this path, I'm likely to get a similar best case scenario to that. That's if I do well. So during my final year, when everyone was applying for those jobs and getting rejected after 7 stages, I thought, okay, I can go down this job or I can try something else. And I actually made a video, dude, which is on my Facebook profile from 7 years ago of the final day when I finished my exam. So probably similar state to where you're going to be in a minute, where I just said, all right, I've just finished. I'm going to try this online thing. I'm going to try this marketing agency thing. And sort of the rest was history from there. That was what I just dedicated myself to doing, and sort of built it up over time.
There's this big question that's going around now, is SMMA dead?
It's a good question. I think it depends how you define it, right? If you think of it as, what a lot of gurus teach in terms of just running some ads for a business, then in a way kind of is much more difficult than it used to be. I wouldn't say anything's ever dead, right? Because what does dead mean? It really just means, is it oversaturated? That's what that really means. And what does saturated means? Well, it means every business in a market has enough customers, because there would therefore be no more demand for people to do services. Right now, that's obviously never going to be the case. If you're smart and innovative, and if you can do something a little bit different, you can always make an impact. Businesses are always going to need more customers. They're always going to need marketing until the end of time, right? So it's quote unquote dead in the sense that, yeah, it's different now. And to be successful, when I started back then, yeah, dude, I walked into a local pizza shop with a file of facts of pages of examples of ads, and I would literally show them, and I'd be like, hey, there's this thing called Facebook ads, let me run them for you. And that was how I got my first client, because no one really knew what that was back then. Whereas now,
When was this?
this was while I was at uni, so this would have been like probably like 2017, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So a while ago now. But it was very different back then. So you might look and think, okay, well, it was easier then because there was less competition, but there was also no one telling you how to do it, so it was harder to figure it out. And two, businesses didn't know what it was, right? So it was actually a lot more difficult to convince them that they should be on this thing called social media back then. Now, obviously, every business is on social media and they know they need to be
That's
on
right. Yeah.
social media, right? But back then, it wasn't like that. So I would say it's dead if you're still doing it that way. But if you're smart, you're just looking at, okay, how can I provide value to this business in terms of what they need now in 2024? And if you could do that and you can adapt, is like that quote. It's not the smartest who survive. It's not the strongest who survive. It's the most adaptable that survive. I think it was Darwin who said that. So that's essentially the key. That's essentially the key with it. It's just adapting.
Yeah. The markets are always going to change, and that's one of the biggest feats of an entrepreneur is to adapt in his market and in his environment. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced in these early days of business, and how did you overcome them?
Probably most of the challenges were around limiting beliefs. I had massive imposter syndrome. I would think, if I'm 18, why would this business work with me? I have no experience. That was probably the biggest one. How do you overcome that? Well, first of all, if you're struggling with any of those types of beliefs, realize that a belief is by default a belief and therefore not a fact. So it isn't necessarily true. A belief is just a thought that's repeated over your mind many, many times to the point where you believe it, right? That's how we form beliefs. It's just the same thought repeating. So question like, is that actually true? Like what when these limiting beliefs are coming up, if you don't feel confident, if you don't feel like, why would a business choose you? Because that's what I went through, and now a lot of the guys I mentor or coach have the same kind of things coming up, right, when they're starting out. And then question, okay, if it's not true, what would the opposite to that be? So for me, a big one was around like age and not having experience. Well, I just flip those to my advantage, right? So I would say, okay, these older people who run businesses, sure, they have more experience, but they have no idea about social media, online marketing, all these things. Whereas I'm young and I do, so I can use that as an advantage. Okay, I don't have experience. Well, that means I'll just put in the grit to figure it out. They're going to get a lot more care and attention from me than they would with a bigger agency, right? So whatever the like challenges internally, there's always an opposing side to it because it's just a story in your head ultimately, right? And there's two sides to every story, no matter what those challenges are. Belief is really everything, man. Like zero to, I imagine like a lot of people listening to this probably want to get to say 10K a month, right? The only going from 0 to 10K a month is just having the belief that it's possible, that you can actually do it. And then there's no difference between me or someone else they look at who's there, apart from the fact that they believe that they could do it and just took action on it. That truly is the the belief. And then once you have that belief and you start getting some results, that belief changes to probability. Now you know it's probable that you can have more success because you've got evidence to experience it. Just a quick question, like the people who watch this, is it like students? Is it people in jobs, interested in business? Like where are they at?
It's usually like demographic is like between 18 to 25. It's we the channel is focused on self improvement and entrepreneurship
Cool.
for these. Yeah,
So yeah, so that's similar to my audience and the
yeah,
guys I coach, right? So maybe they're in uni or they're just trying to do something online, trying to get, you know,
starting
try
out. Yeah,
improve themselves. Okay, cool, cool.
yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree. If you start something by believing it's not possible or you can't do it, you're already setting yourself up for failure. And I mean, we don't want that, right? And once you've got that belief, as you said, it's all then up to the work you're gonna bring and provide, and that's the only thing that matters in the end. It's not your belief, it's it's the work you put in. What some of the first steps you took into building your first SMMA?
Yeah. So I would say the thing that got me into it was a very famous ad with a Lamborghini in it and a garage, so by a guy called Ty Lopez. So at the time when I think it was
Oh, all right.
2016 when he started, here in my garage. I'm
Yeah.
sure everyone's seen that ad at some point, right? I remember
Yeah.
being, I remember being where you are in my dorm room at uni, and that ad was going around. And I remember I'd go into my friends' rooms, and I would see them like watching it and laughing at it, all these parodies of it, right? But I was there going back into my room thinking like, okay, I actually need to learn from this guy. So I like eventually, after seeing his ad so many times, I clicked on it, and he was selling a course. And the course was called the 67 Steps, and it was basically 67 lessons he'd learned from his mentors for $67. And dude, I remember back then, it took me like a week to make that decision because $67 was like my going out money for the weekend. And
Yeah, no, it's a big deal for
that
students.
was a huge investment for me, bro, back then. And best $67 I ever spent. And the two main things I took away from that were one, read the right kinds of books because it's the cheapest and most accessible way to the smartest minds that have ever existed are literally written down on pages in books, and you can literally access the mind of Steve Jobs. You can access the mind of Elon Musk by reading their biographies and autobiographies. They put all their best stuff in there, right? But in the world
Mm.
of TikTok and reels and shorts, like people's attention spans are just trash. So you have to like and look, you don't need money to do that. A book costs like 10 quid or $10, right? You can find that money. So I started to just stack my shelves in my room just with all these business books, personal development books, autobiographies,
Mm.
and I just started to reprogram myself because really, like I said, it's just all about the belief, right? So if you can install new beliefs from people who have done amazing things, you start to actually think like them. You start to see the world like them. You start to have their worldview. If I ask this question for anyone listening, if you had Elon Musk personally mentoring you and you could get inside of his mind, do you think you would be able to be successful or not? Right? If the answer is not, obviously, at least there's a much higher probability, right? I think we can all agree on that at least. You can have that right now just by going and reading some books. So
Mm.
that's a great place to start, particularly if you're earlier on
And
in your
how often
journey.
would you read
All the time,
all
as
the
much as
time?
I
Like
could.
how many books would you like? A book a week, a book a month, two books a
So
week, a
so
book a day?
yeah, well, here's the interesting thing. I also learned how to read from that course. I think a lot of
Okay.
people read incorrectly. So when you're reading to gain knowledge and gain insight, you never want to read a book cover to cover. It's a complete waste of time. So here's how I would read a book. Open the book, and I did this today. I literally did this today. So I read a book by a guy called William Brown. You might have seen him on YouTube. He's a new online info guy popping off right now
Yeah.
on YouTube, right? He wrote a book. It's called How to 10 Million or something. So I was like, okay, let's see what his book's about. So I opened the book. I first ignore the intro. First of all, look at what are all the different chapters, so I can instantly understand all the key points of what the whole book is about from an
Mm.
overview perspective, right? I'm sure a lot of people do that. But now I'm keeping a note. Okay, what are the three key areas that I want to take information from? Because every
Mm.
book has about 3 to 5 pieces of gold in it. The rest of it's just usually filler and fluff, right? To fill out a couple hundred pages.
Yeah.
So once you know that, now instead of just reading a book blindly where you're going to forget 90% of the information, now you're mining for gold. So when I would read these books, I would literally have the perspective of, right, I'm mining for gold and I'm just trying to find a key insight, a nugget, a piece of wisdom that I can go and action today, right?
Mm.
I'm not reading just for the sake of reading to get more information, because information's out there, it's free. Most people don't have a lack of information, they actually have too much information, right? They have information overload. So I would read it with that in mind, and then I would basically read the first few pages of every important chapter of the book, because usually at the beginning of each chapter it's going to summarize what's going to happen in that chapter. I would then read the end of that chapter because it will kind of like wrap it up again, and then I'll just scan through and just look for key insights. So you can read it. If you do that, dude, you can pretty much get the insights from a book in an hour or two. So that was my speed reading approach to gaining the insights.
No, it's great. It's a great technique. Yeah, you basically just divide the time to read a book by what, like 30, 20, and you get all the benefits from it.
100%.
What strategies did you use to quickly sign new clients and grow your agency to 50K?
My strategy was just talk about what I'm doing to every person who would listen to me. So if I'm going to my barbers and they're cutting my hair while they're trimming my beard, I'm like, yo, you need Facebook ads. And I'm just talking to them about Facebook ads. I'm going to my favorite pizza restaurant. I'm like, yo, you need Facebook ads. I'm in the dentist chair. And I literally signed that pizza restaurant. I signed a dentist, my own dentist, just by being in the chair and saying, "Hey, I actually think I can help you with this," right? So it
Mm.
wasn't any like there was no shortcut to it. There was no trick to it. It was just actually getting out there and having as many conversations in person as possible, because what that does is it develops the skill of communication and sales. Warren Buffett said the number one skill that he attributes the majority of his success to, it isn't maths, which you would think it would be since he's one of the best investors of all time. It was communication. He took a communications course, and as a young person in today's day and age, that is one of the number one skills lacking. It's actually communication, because of
Big
how
time.
much technology we use, right? So if you can just do that and just become a good communicator, and how do you become a good communicator? Practice communicating. Just talk to people. That was essentially what I did, and I'll tell you how I actually got the first client. Quick story. When I was at
Please.
uni, a guy came in to speak and do a workshop on marketing. So I'm like, I've just done this Ty Lopez course. He told me, number one, like I said, read books, but number two, what he said is find a mentor. So now I'm like, okay, where do I find this magic mentor who's gonna give me all the sauce, right? He's gonna tell me how to become a millionaire. Within literally that week, I saw a post on a bulletin board at my university about this marketing workshop, right? Now, here's the thing. When you have an intention for something, you will start to see it. It's like if you say, if I go to you right now, look at everything in the room that is green, right? And you look around. I mean, even your hoodie's green, right? Right?
Yeah.
You can probably see your hoodie. You can see other things. My shirt is green
Mm.
as well. Great color. Now, if I ask you, tell me everything that's red, right? You can't think
I've
of
heard it
anything.
again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you weren't looking for it, right? It's called your RAS, your reticular activation system in your head,
Mm.
which basically just determines what you see. So I was primed with what to look for, which was a mentor, which is how I found one. And so anyway, this guy came in to speak, did a marketing workshop. He ran a seven-figure Google Ads marketing agency. It was voted number one by Google in the whole of Europe. He was exactly 10 years older than me, making seven figures, had a wife and a family, which was also my goal. Pro tip, by the way, when you're looking for a mentor, don't just look for how much money they make. Look, are they actually living the life you want to live? Because you can follow someone who's making all the money in the world, but if they're overweight, if they're,
Yeah, if
just
they're not where you want to be.
yeah, then
Yeah.
then don't. And I see that all the time, right? People just blindly copy. So you got to be careful. Um, but at the end of that workshop, I knew, okay, I want to get this guy to be my mentor. I waited until everyone had gone to speak to him, asked him questions, and I just walked up to him. I remember my hands were sweating. I was stuttering. I had my friend with me as well, who didn't care about business, because I was like nervous. And I just said, hey, his name was Marcus. Great talk. I'd love to come and work for you for free. And he just paused and he looked at me and he smiled and he just said, no. And I was shocked. I thought, oh man, I thought this guy would want
Oh,
me to work for him for free, right? I now from that perspective, it's obvious I would have been more of a liability than an asset to him because he would have had to train me and I had no clue what I was doing. But what happened was we became friends. We went for coffee and we actually both connected over personal development, funnily enough. And he was really into it as well. And we essentially became friends and through that, through not just him telling me what to do, but seeing the way he lived, seeing how in his office when there was a fire, how he dealt with it, how he prepared for a meeting, how he took a phone call, the way he carried himself, the way he communicated. I was able to learn by seeing it over the shoulder, right? And so that was essentially what gave me the belief. Now, how did I get my first client? That was the original question. I was obsessed. What did I say earlier? I was obsessed with the thing Facebook ads, Facebook ads. I was like, it was all I was thinking about, right? I was convinced that this was going to be the thing. And so one day he said, hey, we've got this campaign for a long term client. They want to do a Facebook campaign. We don't know how to run Facebook ads. You can run them for this campaign. So this is a seven-figure company with an office of 30 people, and they want me to run their Facebook ads, right? And he said, yeah, just start working on the campaign. I'll put you in touch with the person managing the account. Just bill me your hourly rate at the end of it. And I remember thinking, holy crap. I ran back to my library. It was UEA I went to. I ran back to the library, so University of Norwich. And the first thing I did was I Googled what is the average hourly rate of a marketing consultant? Because I had no idea. And I remember it was £83 per hour. And I was making like £5 per hour in part-time jobs. So I was like mind blown by this. And I so that was my first client. And it gave me the belief that if this company wanted, if I could provide value to this company at this level, who else could I help? So yeah, that was the story of the first client.
yeah. Wow. To go back to the mentoring, how often were you around them?
I'd say we met maybe a couple times a month in person, um, or had a call. But then what would happen
Mm.
is we'd start to go to events together. We'd message back and forward, over WhatsApp now and again. I would say the key thing to have a successful relationship with a mentor is when he would give me an insight or a piece of advice, I would literally go straight home and just execute on what he said. And then as soon as I'd done it, I would tell him, like straight away. And what this is how we sort of developed such a good relationship because he was a kind guy. He'd mentored other people, other students as well. He wasn't doing it for money. He was just doing it as like a nice way to give back a little bit. And he said to
Mm.
me, look, most of the kids he'd mentored weren't taking action on it. They weren't doing anything, and it would be frustrating to him. So he wouldn't give them his time. But because he saw me actually taking action, making progress, he told me that
Mm.
he saw parts of himself in me, and so that was why he was happy to pour back into me. So best thing you can do is, if you do find a mentor, is just do exactly what they say, because they're then going to want to give you more, and then realize that you doing what they say is actually providing value to them, because it's making them actually feel good, which is an exchange.
Mm. And what do you say to those that are scared to come across as too needy?
It's a good question. I would say, hmm, I guess it's where EQ comes into it, which is emotional intelligence and being able to read somebody, like read the room, right? So if you're just constantly asking questions and now you're starting to get like one word responses, and then now the responses are slowing down and you're basically
You know
becoming
you're doing something wrong.
a needy guy trying to get a date, right? It's probably not going well. But also look at also look at what can you give to them. So anything that I thought he was interested in, or things that he was working on, I would also bring to the table, right? So I'm also giving more that, so for every insight he would give me, I would try and do 5 times as much as that for him in different ways to make it, a beneficial exchange in the relationship.
That makes complete sense. And to go back with the whole looking for green, looking for red, um, the one I use is basically when my dad used to buy a new car. I'd just see that car everywhere, even though I never saw it before. Like, I'd be like, oh, that's a cool car. And then in the next few days, I'd be like, yo, this car's everywhere. So you're clear, your brain is clearly programmed to, you set your mind to something, you're gonna see it everywhere. And if you're being depressed and if you are prone to feeling sad, you're just gonna get all the cues of reinforcing this belief of why you should be sad. So it goes back to your limiting beliefs. So you've got to really be careful with how you use your brain, because you can quickly self hypnosis yourself into bad decisions or a bad uh, mindset. I was wondering, how do you balance authenticity and strategic branding in your personal and professional social media presence?
Well, the more authentic you can be, the better, because personal branding is just you, right? And
Mm.
the best personal brands are just the people who are actually the most authentic. Simple as that, right? So the more you cannot be too authentic. Um, Authenticity is such a magnetic trait, because everyone actually deeply desires to just fully be themselves, be carefree, not care what people think about them, right? Everyone desires that. It's such a highly sought after trait. So I wouldn't even say there is a balance. I would say the more authentic you can be, the better. Now, the question is, how do you then be authentic? That's maybe another good question to ask. Because when I first started doing content, I remember I had a lot of resistance to putting content out there and showing myself online. And one of my later mentors, this was a mentor I paid 15 grand to. So I'd started paying for mentors by this point, once I had a bit of money. But I remember asking him, I said, I know I need to start making content and putting myself out there, but I've just got a lot of resistance to it. And he was actually a Russian guy. And so he was very straight talking, no BS, straight to the point. And he said to me, if you had the cure for cancer, who are you to deprive somebody else from that cure? And what he what he meant by that is, stop thinking about yourself. It's not about you. It's about who you're helping. And that developed into one of my core principles, which is being in service, right? Truly just looking at how you can truly help other people. And with conscious entrepreneur, it's one of our key values there as well. It's just, if you can help someone, just do it. If you've got the capacity, and you got the time, just help someone. A little bit can go a long way. And so with with as that authenticity starts to develop, what you'll also find is that you'll face more of your own fears, more of your own insecurities, because the thing that stops you from being authentic is what being concerned or worried, mostly about what other people think, or any um, of your own fears, right? And so the
Mm.
key, this is where the inner work comes into it, because if you are feeling like insecure or anything like that, you're not going to want to put yourself out there. So you address those internal things first. Now you genuinely feel carefree, you feel good, you don't feel judged about what other people think of you, and that is what makes the strongest personal brand, because everyone is truly craving authenticity. It's a word that's thrown around right now, authenticity, and what people will do is they'll look at people who they think are authentic and then do what they do. But by default, that's not authentic because it's now not you,
Yeah,
right? It's
exactly.
it's so- it's someone else you're
Yeah.
you're emulating. So best thing you can do is just start to really know yourself. And how do you know yourself? Well, meditation, for example, means to become
Mm.
familiar with. So the more you can spend time with yourself, start to think deeply, start to spend, really go inward, you can start to know yourself, and therefore what you're sharing is going to just authentically be you. And that's how you're going to build a really strong personal brand that really magnetizes people in. And when you have that personal brand, it doesn't matter what you're then selling, whether you're doing an agency like I was back then or now what I'm doing with Conscious Entrepreneur. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. People resonate with me for me because I've put it out there.
Mm. I think something a lot of people struggle with is the fact of being like vulnerable,
Mm.
because obviously being authentic also comes with, sharing your struggles like you're doing right now. You're sharing the struggles you went through. And I think for a lot of people, it takes time for them to, sort of familiarize themselves to share these vulnerabilities.
So there's a reason why for that as well. What society tells men, that men should be strong, men should be stoic, men shouldn't be emotional. If you are, you're judged for it, right? You're seen as less than or weaker than. So it's no
Mm.
wonder that we struggle. It's more men really. We're talking about who struggle with the vulnerability, right? So one of the key values that I share inside of what I do is actually that vulnerability equals strength. Because if you're such a
Mm.
strong man, if you're so jacked doing all this self improvement, why are you afraid of your own emotions? Why are you afraid of yourself, right? And a lot of men build up this external, you know, view of themselves, get bigger, look better, whatever it is, but deep down, they don't actually feel worthy, or they don't actually feel good enough, or they don't feel secure or confident, right? So the real strength and the real courage comes in that vulnerability. Now, vulnerability doesn't just mean bitching about your problems and moaning and complaining. That's not what vulnerability means. It means just owning what's truly there for you, owning what is true, and that can be, it can be limiting beliefs, it can be fears. But when you do that, you actually, as a leader, give other people who you talk to or who follow you permission to then go there themselves. Because again, everyone is craving that authenticity in today's world, where so much of what's shown online is just fake, right? And it's not a bad thing. Everyone
Mm.
wants to put their best foot forward. There's nothing wrong with that. But you got to remember, those people who you're comparing yourselves to online are not, like, you're comparing yourselves to their best 0.1% of their life.
Yeah, you're comparing their highs with your lows.
Exactly. And you're comparing more when you're in your low state, right? When you're doing well, you're not really comparing most of the time. So just take everything with a pinch of salt, and you know, it, be vulnerable with yourself to start with. Don't worry about even sharing it. Just take a pen and paper. One of the best exercises I did is I just take a pen and paper, and I would just write down the truth. Here's how I'm actually
Mm.
feeling. Here are the thoughts that actually go through my mind when I'm in bed. Because when you do that, you allow yourself to detach from them. You can take a step back. You can observe them. You can realize that you're not them. They're just thoughts, and actually, everyone else has them.
Mm. So you're a big advocate for journaling.
Yeah, definitely. Like everyone has their own outlet. Journaling something I've used periodically from time to time. I think it's very very helpful. For other people, it might just be talking it out with friends. For other people, it might be doing meditation, or I'm big into breath work. Whatever the modality is that helps you to process things and get into a better state, do it. I would just say just try them. Just try them all and see what works for you.
Mm. Thank you for that, Ibrahim. Um, quick side question. I just realized that a lot of, well, recently, a lot of the personal and professional social media accounts have been sort of merged.
Mm.
Like, you don't really find this distinction between I've got my personal account and my professional one. It's all sort of merged into one. What do you think of that?
A good friend of mine, uh, Darren, said something around this, and I'll steal what he said. There's no B2B, there's no B2C, there's just P2P, person to person,
Yeah.
right? You're dealing with people
Oh yeah. Well said.
at the end of the day, right? So 100% just by putting yourself out there. Like if you're thinking of starting a personal brand, do not start a new social media account. Use the current one you have. You will be scared that the people who currently follow you from back in the day, from people you went to school with, will judge you. That's the whole point. Because by doing that, you're going to force yourself to create a new identity and open yourself up to scrutiny, judgment, them talking about you behind your back. And you have to go through that discomfort of feeling that to grow, because all growth comes with discomfort. So if you can just face that head on and just say, yeah, I know I'm going to be judged, but this is, if I want to build an authentic personal brand, it's going to come with it either way. When you put yourself out there, you're also opening yourself to all the new people, all the people who, once you level up, will now resonate with you and create space for them. So 100%, all on one account. Don't change anything. Keep it all there.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm actually in this. I'm actually in that period of. So I've got my main account on Instagram, and I've got my side one for the podcast, the Otherwise Talk. I'm slowly starting this transition between, sort of not merging them, but sort of like making, like collaborating between the posts. So I'm slowly starting there. And being honest, it is hard because obviously I just got out high school, so I still have all my high school friends and people I've known back then, and I can feel it. Like it's hard for me to sort of put my reels and my podcast moments on my page, and it feels weird, and very uncomfortable, as you said. But I'm trying to fight through it. For the moment, I'm sort of keeping the rails off my grid. And at some point, it's just all gonna go all together. So I can say firsthand, it is difficult. There's a lot of what do you call it, like friction. There's a lot of friction.
What's the fear beneath that? Like, why don't you want to have it all
I,
there?
I don't know. I think it goes back to what you said, being judged, and also it's and thinking of it, I don't really give a f. Um, but yeah, I guess I do then if I have this friction, right?
Well,
Um,
look, here's the
so
thing,
yeah,
man. We'll spend more time caring about the judgment of people who are not even living the life remotely similar to what
yeah,
we want to
exactly.
live, right? So their opinion actually doesn't even matter. I would be more concerned about the opinion of people who are where you want to be. And I can guarantee you, man, anyone who's where you want to be will just be encouraging you. They'll just be wanting you to continue down your path, do more of it.
That's true. Yeah, and yeah. So how do you approach sales, and what techniques have you found to be most effective when it comes to closing deals and scaling your business?
Yeah, man. Good question. I just started up a new coaching position for an online sales community. So there's 350 guys all their job is to make, all their goals are to make between 10 and 30K a month doing sales, right? And we had our first call yesterday, and I'm focusing more on the mindset side of it for them, helping them.
Congrats on that.
Thank you, bro. I would say when it comes to sales, absolutely there are sales fundamentals, techniques, understanding how to ask the right questions, understanding how to really just be a good listener is probably the number one key to sales. The fact that you're doing a podcast means you're learning sales every single day, because sales is actually just mostly listening and then asking the right questions. So you're personally putting yourself in a great position to be better at sales, right? You can learn books. You can learn books. There you go. You can read books on sales. One I read back in the day was called Spin Selling, which is still a good one to this day. But really, once you learn the basic frameworks of how to sell, most of it just comes down to the internal side of things, right? And how you actually think about sales and what you're actually doing. Number one thing is truly just believing in what you're selling. Because if you have true belief and conviction in what you're selling, the other the other person will also feel that belief and conviction, and that is how they'll buy into you. Whether you're selling a $1,000 a month social media marketing service, or you're trying to get 10 million invested into your new startup, they're going to be looking for that conviction, that enthusiasm inside of you, right? Which comes from that belief. So that's number one. Number two is sales is service. So if you just replace the word sales with service or helping someone, suddenly it completely flips the frame in your head of how can I get something from this person to how can I help this person. And sometimes that means if you can't help the person, just telling them, hey, I actually don't think I'm the best person to help you right now. And the reason why it's important to have that distinction in your head is because if you will tell someone when you don't think you can help them, when you do think you can help someone, it lets you give yourself the permission to do everything you can, dig as deep as you need to go, ask the tough questions that you need to ask, because sales is not the time to go tip of the iceberg and ask the nice questions. It's the time to go full iceberg and ask the deep, uncomfortable questions to challenge people on what their objections are, to challenge people when they're, just throwing you a smokescreen. The only way you can really have the conviction to do that is when you truly believe that you can actually help someone. So that's the number one thing I would say. Really build that belief inside of you. And then all the tactics, all the strategies, the tonality stuff, that just comes naturally. I much prefer a natural approach to sales, because again, what does it do? It shows that you actually care about what you're doing, and that is a rare commodity in today's day and age. I can guarantee anyone you're selling to has been sold to before, they've been on a sales call before or in person, wherever it is. So if you can just show you're actually trying to help them, you actually care about them and this, whatever you're offering them, that'll take you a really, really long way.
Perfect. And what systems and processes have you found essential for managing and scaling your SMMA effectively?
So there's a few different key systems, right? The first one's always going to be around acquisition. So having a system in place to predictably and consistently generate attention and generate leads. So there's different ways to do that. There's cold systems, cold outreach, right? Whether you're like I was, walk it while the dentist is trying to numb my tooth for a
In your
filling. I'm
mouth.
I'm I'm literally like, yo, you need Facebook ads? Like, let's set up that meeting afterwards, right? Like, so whether that's your system or it's, I sent out. I remember one of the things we did was we sent out letters, right? It was a strategy called lumpy mail. I learned this from Sam Ovens, who's kind of an OG in the space. And what it was is you'd send an actual physical letter with their address and name physically written on the letter, and then you'd put something in there in the letter. So it was lumpy, because if there's something physically in a letter addressed to you and you can see something in it, yo, that open rate, talk about email open rate, that letter open rate is going to be about 100%, right? So we would do that.
Something lumpy. So what were you putting it so it feels lumpy?
Yeah, I think we did. I got these like little shoe key rings. This is such an OG strategy. It was these little shoe key rings, and the reason I did that is because I said, "Hey," I would put the shoe key ring in the letter, and I'd say, "Hey, I'm just getting a foot in the door. Hope that's okay." And it was just like a terrible joke, but it worked, right? Um, but nowadays, you might be sending out emails, you might be sending DMs, you might be running ads, you might be building your personal brand and creating content to draw people in. Whatever strategy it is, just make sure there's a process around it. And once it works, once you find something that actually gets people interested and wanting to have conversations with you, you just keep doing it. You just do it as much as you can, whether that's through software and automations or hiring a team member once you have the resources to do so. That's going to be the first system, right? Just acquisition, because leads are the lifeblood of the business. Then really just want to process around sales, whether that's, having a Zoom call, which is going to be what it is in 90% of cases nowadays. And then the same thing for your fulfillment as well, having a process in place where ideally you can have some kind of SOP in place that's going to be pretty scalable and consistent, where you know mostly what you're going to do each time when you sign a new client, so you can productize, and then those three core systems will then enable you to scale up.
To go back to the lumpy uh,
You like the
envelope
lumpy
letter,
mail?
I like it. I was thinking, what would be the equivalent for say an email or just cold approaching in well, not physically in that case. Do you think that's an equivalent?
Yeah, I mean, I did. Dude, this is where like creativity is your only limiting factor, right? Because
Yeah, sky's the
every
limit.
everything that has been created, everything, whether it's a skyscraper in Dubai or that microphone right in front of you, it started as a thought in someone's mind, and that thought manifested into action and then a physical thing, right? So one example of a thing we did with email is we would get these, it would be a picture of me holding two coffee cups, and then one of the coffee cups I'd have my name written on it, and then the other one we would, using like Canva or something, write their name on it. And so again, it would just and just be like, hey, do you want to grab a 15-minute virtual coffee? That'd be another one that we would do.
It's personalized. They're gonna appreciate it more if it's
When
personalized for
you're,
sure.
I'm speaking to the people who are like probably starting out, right? You're at zero, or you maybe got a
Mm.
client or two. Don't try and systemize everything, and you're not like, you've got nothing to systemize, right? You at this point,
Yeah,
what
let's
but
be
what you
real.
do
Yeah, for sure.
what you do have is your time, your creativity, your energy. So take the time, like really personalize things. Like one of the guys I'm working with, he's around your age. He's doing an internship right now alongside a degree, and within he was trying to get clients for his agency for 9 months. He signed two and it didn't go well. Within 24 hours of starting, he had his first client. And the reason why is because we just personalize things, right? He actually reached out, took the time to really understand the business, and that was just via emails as well, just by having true personalization, authenticity in that. He now makes three times the salary he was getting paid doing that internship, and he can leave that job, right? So
Mm.
just put in the extra effort. Like, I'll give you another example. One guy, this was a couple years ago, he reached out to me, and he said, "Hey, um, I want to build this funnel for you for free. I think I can make yours better. Can I do it?" And I said, it was perfect timing. I actually needed one. I said, "Yeah." He built it. It was really good. He did all the revisions I asked for free. What happened then is I started coaching him. He joined my program. He started doing well, and then a year later, he started working with me in my agency. He started doing well, putting in the effort. He then flew out with me to Bali and started doing well there. then we started, literally, we got a villa together and we were just scaling the agency together, right? And I found out along the way that we actually went to the same school, which is crazy, crazy synchronicity. But it just goes to show, right? What did he do different? He just DM'd me on social media. That was all he did.
Yeah.
But the difference was he actually just led with value, personalization, gave gave up front, and then it led him all the way onto, for him, like a life-changing experience.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's incredible when you think about it. Like every decision you take and every instance can just completely reshape your life. If you didn't send that DM, you'd be a very, very different place right now. I've always found that
Just
crazy.
think of human incentives, right? Everyone wants something. So if you just think, how can I give someone something that they want, right? If you just do that enough times, you will build up enough goodwill where, like someone like Alex Hormozy would say, it'd be unreasonable for you not to succeed, right? You just stack the odds in your favor. You've got the time, you've got the creativity, you've got the grit. Put it in, and just essentially just look at what everyone else is doing and just do the opposite, right? So if everyone's just spamming out emails, just say, okay, instead of doing that, why don't I take the time to say, who are the top 100 people who would be a dream client? Spend the time, research them, create personalization, offer them something incredible. One, two, three of them will say yes. That's all you need to get started.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you stay ahead of the industry trends and continuously improve your agency's performance?
You just got to be in the dirt. You just got to
It
be,
goes back to adaptability.
yeah, you got to be you've got to truly care about what you're doing enough to really be paying attention to the meta of what's going on, right? That means looking in forums, that means looking at online at what people in your industry are doing, sharing, posting, networking with people. That's a super big one. Is if I could have gone back and done something different, one of the things I would have changed is, I spent so much time just in my room with my, hoodie on and my noise canceling headphones, just grinding away at the computer because I was told, hey, that's what you got to do to be successful. You got to be a lone wolf. The reality is, in business, it's the complete opposite. It's really about who you know and how you can create a strong network, because you can go and put 10 hours into trying to figure out some strategy, or you can start to build a network of like-minded people and just learn from each other, help each other. And that really is one of the fastest ways to just quantum leap. As soon as I started doing that, you know, I remember learning about Go High Level, if you know what that is. It's a software, 4.5 years ago, before anyone was using it. And that back then was a huge innovation for our agency because we were the only ones doing it at the time, right? So we were able to get, for about a year and a half before everyone started kind of catching on and copying what we were doing, we could offer something completely different to the market. So that happened because of networking, right? Because of, I actually met a friend who
Mm.
was using it in another niche. I helped him with something, he helped me with something. Boom, led to a lot of success.
What do you wish you knew about SMMA before you started?
I would just say I wish I knew how valuable it actually was, in terms of not just a way to make money, but also a way to build skills. The reason I still teach people it to this day and help people who run them is because I believe it is the best beginner business model you can start with, because you start with nothing. You can start with no capital, no team, honestly very little experience, and you can learn the skills of communication, sales, lead generation, outreach, systems, client relationships, fulfillment, like all of these skills that you learn are then transferable to any business you could possibly ever want to run. One or multiple of those skills are going to be transferable to it. So I wish I realized how valuable just doing it actually was because of how much those skills compounded. And the reason why I wish I knew that is because I got to a certain point where I kind of just thought I knew everything I needed to know and stopped learning. I'm still learning to this day and getting better at it. So I wish I kept that beginner's mindset for longer because going back to your previous question, that is how you get ahead, right? It's by having a beginner's mindset and realizing there's everything is constantly adapting, constantly changing. So if you can have that mindset and then adapt with it, that's how you can always be, 1 to 2 steps ahead.
Mm. And what advice would you give to someone looking to start their own social media marketing agency today? And what common mistakes would they avoid?
For the advice, so I would say pick your niche wisely. It's really easy to just jump into a niche because you see a lot of other people doing it. But when it comes to picking your niche, there's a few key things that I look at. So one of them is TAM, total addressable market. How big is the market? Because if you're working with let's just say dentists, right? Really big niche. Great. Okay. Good.
Mm.
Checks off the box. So you could say yeah. But then the second thing I would look at is, do you have some kind of interest, passion, or an advantage where maybe you know someone who's a dentist or a family member's a dentist that actually gives you a leg up, right? Because if you can find that, now you're giving yourself just a much quicker head start. What I did was I I kind of just worked in a bunch of different niches, and like one of them was like an insurance company, for example, and it was a great client. I worked with them
Mm.
for years, but I knew nothing about insurance. And realistically, if I just focused around things that I actually cared about or areas where I knew someone or had a bit of an advantage, I would have scaled way quicker.
And when it comes to niches, is it better to go too broad or too restrained?
I would say when you're starting, try and you know, there's that saying, the riches are in the niches. I would try and be more specific if you can, because you'll be able to get paid more if you can solve a specific problem. You can charge more for it. The broader you go, the bigger the competition is that the guys that you'll be competing with are going to be huge companies. Whereas if you can offer a really specific solution to a sub niche, right? So a niche within a niche, and focus on that, then when you're speaking to those people, you'll be able to much more deeply resonate with them, and you'll be much more likely to be able to, actually sign some of them as clients.
Mm. How do you see the social media marketing agency industry evolving in the next few years?
I think it's gonna get the actual service that people are offering and delivering. It's gonna get a little bit more. Um, I would probably say less beginner friendly in a way, because just knowing one skill, whether it's short form content editing or just running ads, is getting more and more commoditized by AI, by competition. So just having one skill is going to be really difficult to stand out. So the way I see it going is skill stacking. So being able to say, hey, okay, we can make your short form content, we can run ads with that, we can help you convert those leads into appointments through understanding the skill of appointment setting. We can then coach you on sales through understanding sales to actually convert those sales into clients. I see it going more that
Mm.
way. In general, the
And
way
wait,
the
sorry,
whole
and what skills? What's the top three skills you think is the best? to look for at first?
That's a good question. In terms of delivery, or in terms of what you're offering, or in terms of what you need as skills?
Globally, on the broader aspect.
I would say the top skills are always going to be sales and marketing, right? And then, within marketing, there's a lot of different skills. Like, for example, copywriting is a huge skill that's massively undervalued in today's day and age. For me, it always comes down to those two skills, because you can be, the best at delivering a service in a specific industry, but if you can't, market to get leads and sell those leads into becoming a client, you can have the best thing in the world. It doesn't matter. No one's gonna buy it.
Hmm. Thank you. So anyway, you were saying so um, AI and the fact that only having one skill is
Yeah, so I would
evolving.
just yeah, so I would say really just stack your skills to really offer more of a full 360 service. That's really the way it's going. I also see it going more towards, companies more and more not wanting to pay big retainers every single month. So creating, partnership agreements, like a lot of the guys I work with, most of them were getting set up on partnership or commission-based agreements where they'll charge an amount, but then they'll make a lot of their money off the sales. Companies prefer that now, in today's day and age more because they've probably worked with an agency or two by now. So having skin in the game is a lot more attractive. It also then forces you to level up your own skills because now you have to be able to deliver more. But and I also see it going more in the direction of, as an agency, having less clients, total volume, but having a higher LTV per client,
Hmm.
meaning you earn a lot more from just having a handful of them.
Perfect. Thank you for that. What drives you, Ibrahim, in business and in life?
Well, it's changed over time. What used to be my driver when I had just graduated from university and I saw all my friends, going into six-figure jobs, working in London in investment banks, and I was working in my parents' shed, trying to make enough money to move out of my parents' shed. That was my driver back then. Um, over time, it's developed for me. Like once I created, enough to have financial freedom, it moved more to growth and contribution. So to me, growing, whether it's personally or business growing or helping others grow, that's a key driver for me. And just really now being at a point where I can give back these sort of lessons and guiding principles to others and seeing them win, that's a huge driver for me. And the mission of what I do now is to of conscious entrepreneurs to raise the collective consciousness of entrepreneurs, because it's entrepreneurs that change the world, not governments, right? I believe like to really make change in this world, it's entrepreneurs who do it. So spreading this awareness to more people who do it with who actually want to make an impact in what they're doing, I think that's a worthwhile mission. So that's what I'm focused on doing.
How long have you been in Bali, man?
Coming up to 2 years. Yeah, it'll be 2 years in September.
2 years.
Yeah.
How has living in Bali influenced your business practices and your lifestyle as an entrepreneur? And do you think your business would be any different if you were based anywhere else?
Would it be different? I think it forced me to. I mean, being on a different time zone is a big factor. There's a 7 to 8 hour time zone difference between the UK, so that forced me to build it differently, right? To have either systems or team members in place to be able to run it better. So I think it made me
Are most
uh,
of your clients in Bali or in the UK?
Well, for the agency, they're in the UK, but for when if I'm mentoring someone, they're
Okay.
global. So like UK, US, Europe,
Okay, yeah.
Australia, all over the place. Yeah, I think I'd say just like when you're in a different country or somewhere like Bali, you're now around people who have a totally different worldview and mindset. So when I was in the UK, people were, it's a bit of a generalization, but a bit more closed-minded or more pessimistic. Somewhere like here, no one's from here, so there's not a culture in terms of like people being born here, unless you're obviously a local Indonesian. So everyone comes here with a similar view of, wanting to grow, travel, network, connect, do
Improve.
cool things,
Mm.
improve, right? So that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And your environment is one of the biggest factors and one of the easiest things you can change to skyrocket your growth. The best thing you can do is just to get into a different environment, whether it's around different people, be in a different physical place, join something online where there's people who have that same mindset, because that will be your new primary influence.
Would you recommend to everyone to, or at least aspiring entrepreneurs to move to Bali or Thailand, like Koh Samui or any other exotic remote place?
I mean, if it's what is authentic to you, right? If it's the kind of lifestyle that you personally want to live. Like for me, I like
Hmm.
nature. I like being in a warmer climate. I like access to that kind of
It's better
stuff,
than
right?
the UK.
But it's different for everyone though,
Yeah.
right? Some people like different things. So I think for a lot of people, it's a good place to it's a good thing to do just because it completely changes your inputs, right? When you're in a different environment. So I recommend it. Like once you're earning. And you don't have to be earning a lot of money. I mean, it's cheaper to live in than the UK, right? So it's not like there's a high barrier to entry. I recommend it.
Hmm. Great. And what life lessons have you learned along the way of your journey, not only in business but in self-improvement?
Hmm. Life lessons. That's a good question. Well, it, something I always say is like your internal state equals your external reality. I say that all the time. And what does that really mean? It just means that your current reality you're living, so like your day to day, is just a reflection of what you think, what you feel, what you experience internally, right? So for me, that's when things changed. Things changed when I changed personally. So whenever I'm looking at a new business goal or have a new project in mind, the first thing I'm doing is looking at, okay, what do I need to look at myself internally? What do I need? Where do I need to adapt? Where do I need to shift my own sense of self identity in order to become the person who's capable of, achieving that goal? And there's a lot of power in that because, it's easy to put your, um, it's easy to say like, oh, I'm a victim of circumstance, or this is too difficult, or this is too hard, right? And sometimes things can seem out of your
Mm.
control. But when you know that you can always control what's going on internally, right? You can always control what you do, how you think, how you act. Those are the things that no one can ever take away from you. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest ones.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's about it, man. I really want to thank you for coming on. Uh, I've learnt a lot. I'm sure those listening will too. You gave us brilliant insights, and I'm thankful for having you on. And yeah, I sort of listened, and I obviously discovered also Thomas Park through that podcast too. And I sort of listened to what you were saying, and I just found it very interesting. And you're also talking about internal states, external reality, and yeah, you got me hooked, man. So I'm really happy you accepted the invitation. Um, Especially being as a a small podcast, so it's not easy to get I take bigger guests on. So I just really wanted to thank you for that.
Pleasure, man. You asked some great questions, and I'm excited to see, yeah, your growth journey as well.
Thanks, man. I wish you the best, and yeah, stay safe and see you soon, I
Th-
guess.
Thanks, bro. Good luck with those finals.